All right guys, you watched me rebuild this Wrecked Ducati Panigale V4S from the ground up, and it was a huge undertaking to get this project done. But the question at the end of the day was never if it could be done, but rather, was it worth it? And that's what we're gonna dive into today. And let me tell you, the numbers, what you think I paid and what I actually paid are gonna surprise you, and we're gonna go over everything in depth in this video. So sit back, relax, and we'll see how much I paid for this Wrecked Ducati V4S. First things first, if you have not already seen the video of me rebuilding this Ducati from start to finish, go check that out now. I'll put the link for that video in the description below. After you watch that, this whole video is gonna make a lot more sense to you. So watch that video, hop back here. Now let's get to it. All right, we are gonna jump right into this and go through all of the parts and pieces that were purchased for this bike in order to get it rebuilt. Starting from the top, we're gonna start with the original purchase price of this bike. We originally won this at online auction for $4,975. That was our winning bid. Now that is not what we paid in order to pick the bike up from auction. And then we have auction fees, which nobody really talks about. So we have, on top of that $4,975, a buyer fee of $650. We also have a service fee of $95. I believe that service fee is essentially like their fee for bringing the vehicle out of the yard in order for you to load it up and take it out, which doesn't really make sense because I literally pushed the bike out of the yard. But either way, had to pay that $95 service fee. We have an internet fee of $109. That's basically using their online services for doing the live bidding in order to bid on this bike online. They also have an environmental fee of $15, basically just to keep their property cleaned up since they deal with wrecked cars. And we have a wire transfer fee that I had to pay my bank in order to send the auction company the funds. That was $20. So all in all, purchase price for this bike in its wrecked condition was $5,864. That is what we paid for the bike wrecked. Now let's jump into all the parts and pieces that we had to get for this bike and what those costs were. Hey guys, Rob here. I was actually just in the middle of editing this video when I forgot two very important things that I believe you guys are going to want to know about with this bike. So number one out of those two things, I am not incorporating my labor time into the overall cost of this bike. So all these parts and prices, these are just the cost of materials, not including labor. But if I did have to guess, I had probably a minimum of around 80 hours into this bike of going through rebuilding it. A lot of that is also just kind of some meticulous, in-depth, deep cleaning that I kind of went above and beyond of doing. You guys can take that number as it is and kind of factor out your own pricing of, factoring what labor costs would be for this build. And number two, the other thing that I forgot to include, which some of you have very good eyes and you guys noticed this in the video, the stator cover for this V4. And if you guys have noticed, and yes, it's still scratched like this on the bike. Yes, I know it looks hideous. Yes, I did not replace it, but there is a reason to why I did not replace this scratched up stator cover. And the reason behind that is because I have been in contact with the previous owner of this bike, and he sent me a message and he's like, hey, I love how you're fixing the bike up. I have some carbon pieces that he actually bought for this bike before he wrecked it, and he said that he still has those pieces on hand, and whenever I go to meet him, he said I can take the carbon stator cover, and he has a carbon front sprocket cover as well, and I think he has a carbon tailpiece too. So he said those are waiting for me whenever I go and meet him. I do want to get like an in-depth interview of him, having him see the bike as well, so that's the reason why I did not do the stator cover. I have a new carbon piece that's technically mine, but I don't have it yet, so that's the whole story behind the scratch stator cover. Let's go into the in-depth review of how much this bike costs. Let's go. I do want to give a full disclosure on all of the parts and prices that I have towards this bike. Since I'm a motorcycle dealership, I do have access to a lot of parts for these bikes, and these are at dealer cost. So some of these prices are going to be a little bit cheaper, and also the sponsors for this bike did donate some of the parts for this bike. So the sponsorships are factored in there as well, and I'm going to go over all those prices, break down total cost with those prices factored in and without. Without further ado, jump right into it. First things first, our right side handlebar. Now this is a crazy part to jump into because this was literally the first part that I was looking for this bike because our right side handlebar was broken off. Could not for the life of me find it from Ducati. I called some Ducati dealers. They're like, yeah, this part's discontinued. Like this bike's a 2019 and they can't get me a handlebar. That was not a good start jumping into this bike. So the only one I was able to find was an aftermarket one from basically China. So we got a right side handlebar that I actually did not end up using. That was $30.98. I ended up getting a OEM handlebar with throttle controls later on, and I'll get the price for that one later. So $30.98 for a right side handlebar that I did not end up using. Next part up here, our front stay. This was another part where I ended up getting aftermarket. It was just a little bit more cost effective. That was $111.99. Next piece up, big ticket item, was our headlight for this bike. Our headlight, if you remember, the front left side was broken, the lens was cracked, so we got a new one. That was aftermarket for $428.69 for that headlight. Next up, this is probably one of the cheapest pieces that I used for this bike for rebuilding it, but it was also one of the hardest pieces to acquire. Now this was $13.37, and that was the start switch connector and pins that I had to rewire in order to get our start switch to work for this bike. Now, I'm gonna show you guys, I had to do a lot of research in order to find those pins. Basically, I had to find the parts schematics. Right here are the parts schematics diagrams for those pins and the connectors. And I had to do some hunting online. I had to get the part numbers off of the broken pieces. It was a headache, but I'm so thankful that I was able to go through and get that. So that made for a cheap, easy fix instead of having to replace the entire wire harness. Next up was the oil change. One thing that I did not show on camera was I actually did 3 oil changes for this bike. Now this Ducati had oil that was so black when I originally got it. I drained the oil out. I was going through a normal oil filter change, drained out the old oil, put some really good Maxima 15W50 oil in here and filled it up, and I looked at the sight glass and the thing looked pitch black still. So it was like almost like I didn't even change the oil, and I'm like, you know what, I planned on having this clear clutch cover on there. I can't have dirty black oil flopping around in there if I'm running this clear clutch cover. So I unfortunately had to drain that really expensive oil out of the bike, did a second oil filter change with some cheaper 15W50, ran it for a little bit, drained it, and then put the good stuff in again, and it was crystal clear oil. So oil altogether was $106.46 with the good oil. Cheap oil was about $23.30. So we got about like $130 for the oil, and the oil filters, 3 different oil filters, was $12.96. Next up, we have coolant for the radiator and the reservoir. Since I replaced the radiator, I had to top that back up in the system. Had to get 2 things of ENI antifreeze coolant, and that was $50 total, so $25 each for those bags of coolant. The side fairing brackets, these were the side pieces in order to install these retrofitted newer style, like V4R style fairings on the bike. Basically, I swapped those out so I could mount these fairings up to the bike. $111.14 for those side fairing brackets. The rear fairing stay, that was broken, it was all dirty, that was $168.90. Here we go with the other throttle that I talked about earlier, the electronic throttle with the handlebar. I ended up getting that for $242. That was a nice, quick, easy installation for that piece. Chain and sprockets, we got our 16-tooth front sprocket. I believe it was a JT sprocket, $12.97. 41-tooth rear sprocket, again from JT Sprockets, that was $19.70. And our JT rear sprocket carrier, which I didn't know at the time that I had to purchase in order to install the rear sprocket that I ordered. So I had to get that. That was $71.25 for that rear sprocket carrier. And then our chain that we used for the bike, I wanted a little bit higher end chain that looked a little bit nicer. That was a 525 chain by EK Chains. It's their 3D series chain. That was $108.57. Our front radiator guard trim right here on the inner trim plastic, that was $144.60. Our air intake ducts that kind of surround our front headlight, that was $131.49. That's the piece right up in here. Next thing up, our radiator cap. cheap, small part, but still necessary to get this bike going. $21 for our new radiator cap. The carbon tank cover, this guy right here, this thing fits so nice with putting it on the bike. I was so happy that it was a quick, easy fit. That way I didn't have to get the tank painted. I know it's kind of a cheaper way out, but honestly, with all the other carbon I was putting on the bike, it just went together super easy. $280 for that carbon tank cover. Another big ticket item right here, the Rizoma clear clutch cover. I see a lot of Ducatis out there with the clear clutch covers on them. A lot of people use the Duca bike clear covers. The Rizoma ones were kind of newer on the market as I was shopping for some of these parts. Ended up getting this for $499.95. Driven rear sets, so the left and right side rear sets right there. These I actually got at a really good discount because these were like closeout pricing. I think they were discontinuing them. Got these for $195.90. The CRG clutch and brake levers, left and right side, total $156 for those. Front inner trim plastic, that's a little piece in the front that has that little Ducati logo on it. Underneath the windscreen, that was $40. Our rear tail under tray plastic, sits underneath the rear seat on the back side of the bike. That was $77.10. Just some miscellaneous fairing bolts. I got like a whole kit of fairing bolts for this bike for $44.87. And then also along with that, the clips that those fairing bolts thread into in order to hold the fairings onto the bike. Those were $27.43. Next thing up, our rear signal wire harness. That was missing from the bike when I originally was going through and working on it. So small little harness, maybe about this big. I'd use that in order to plug into the Motodynamic tail light in order for our turn signals to work in the rear. Had a little issue with that, I didn't show on camera. So our rear wire harness was $38.72. The rear taillight rubber dampers that I had to install on the Motodynamic taillight in order to mount to the rear stay. Just a couple little rubber pieces that were needed for installation. Those were $9 for those. The chain guard and mounting bolts. So if you guys saw in the video, I replaced the chain guard on the swing arm because our old one was kind of chewed through. There was a lot of slack from the previous owner that was riding this bike. There was a lot of chain slack that ate through the guard. So I took the old guard off, replaced it with the new chain guard and mounting bolts, and that was $44.56. For the exhaust, if you guys noticed, I installed a little module down on this side right here. That was actually a servo buddy. So that way with our new exhaust that we installed, that little servo buddy kind of tricks the computer into thinking that the stock exhaust is still on there, so it doesn't trigger any warning lights or any engine codes on the dash. So that little servo buddy I popped on there, and that was $75.55. Couple other little pieces, the driven racing bar ends. I didn't really show those installation wise on camera, but those were $38.21 for those. And one part that I ordered that I haven't installed yet was the front suspension fork boots, basically the little boots that sit on top of the fork caps. These ones are still a little bit ripped and torn. I do plan on replacing these down the road, but our new replacement ones are $39.72 for those. And then the last big ticket item, this was basically my entire order from V4 Evo. They did a sponsorship of some of the carbon, radiator, some titanium bits and pieces for the bike, and the mirrors for this bike as well. So the carbon, radiator, mirrors, and some titanium was $964 from V4 Evo. They gave me a discounted rate on some of those parts as part of the sponsorship for this video as well. So that's all the parts for this build that were not necessarily sponsored, but basically everything that I paid for. Again, the V4 Evo stuff, that was a discounted rate, but I still did have to pay for some of those parts. Now we're gonna go to the sponsored parts for this bike, which is going to start off with our fairing kit. Now, if you guys have followed the channel for a while now, you know I use Auctmarts fairings. It's my go-to for any of my rebuilds that I use. If you were to order this fairing kit right now on their website with using the discount code RK Motorsports at checkout, don't forget that, you're gonna score this set of fairings for $617.49. Again, that's not what I paid for these fairings since they were sponsored and I did not have to pay anything for the fairings on this bike. Thank you to Auctmarts for sponsoring again. Discount code RK Motorsports at checkout, get you a discount. Next up, Motodynamic taillight with the fender eliminator. That was $289.90 if I were to buy it right from their website. Again, that was sponsored from them, so that was no cost to me for this build. The CS Racing exhaust, if you are to order that for the Ducati V4 for your bike, be around $1,150.25. Again, huge shout out to the guys at CS Racing. They sponsored the exhaust for the build, so no cost right there for this bike. Tapiseria Italia, awesome company to work with. The seat cover for the bike, they did an excellent job with the stitching. I did some custom ideas, the logo, the color combination. Those guys were super easy to work with. If I was to purchase that seat cover customized, seat cover alone is going to be about $260. And if you want some of those custom options, that's going to be about an additional $36. So again, Tapiseria Italia hooked me up with the seat, no cost there, but that would be the prices if you were to order it through their website. So we have gone through the purchase price of the bike. We've gone through the parts that were installed, parts that had to be purchased in order to fix this bike up, and we've also gone through the sponsored parts for this bike. So the total parts cost, basically everything that I had to buy for this bike, excluding the sponsored parts that were donated, all of the parts and pieces used on this bike was $4,340.38. So that's basically everything I had to put into this bike on top of the original purchase price that we paid for the bike. If we factor what I paid for the bike, plus the parts that I paid for, plus if I were to pay for all of the parts that were sponsored, so basically if I was to have a wrecked bike, buy all the parts myself, this is the price that I would have into this bike right here, and that total is going to be $12,558.02. Can't forget the 2 cents. So $12,558.02 is what the total cost would be if I were to purchase all of those sponsored parts. So next up, the overall true cost, what I paid for this bike right here. Now that is going to be the cost of the bike with parts that I purchased and not the prices for the sponsors factored in. And that overall total cost for my Ducati V4S rebuilt comes to $10,204.38. MSRP, what this bike would cost you brand new in 2019. This bike would be about retail at $27,895. Now that's not including taxes, fees, dealer prep, freight, registration. Out the door, you're gonna be touching at least 30 grand, I'd say, for a bike like this off the showroom floor, brand new. And then if you were to take that brand new bike, put these modifications into there, you know, clear clutch cover, you're gonna wanna throw exhaust on. If you wanted some of the carbon bits and pieces, custom seat, you'd probably be touching around 35K for a bike that looks like this if it was brand new, obviously back in 2019. But still, if you were to be at about 35,000 for a bike brand new that looks like this, and comparing that to our overall total cost for this build of $10,204.38 for a bike like this, I don't think that's too bad. So you figure that's about a third of the cost of a brand new V4S with these modifications. That's the overall total cost for this bike, $10,204.38. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about that price. I know there was a lot of guys that were saying, you know, that I possibly dumped, you know, anywhere from like 9 to 12,000 into this bike. Just in parts and pieces alone. You know, obviously that wasn't necessarily the case. It is a huge help with the sponsors for these videos that help with some of these rebuilds, but you know, you can get a significant discount on some of these bikes if you plan on rebuilding them on your own. Obviously, you have to know what you're looking for. You have to know, what damage to look for, because anytime you buy a wrecked bike, rebuild it, you're gonna have some hidden damage that might not always be seen. And it's always a gamble purchasing a bike like this sight unseen and then rebuilding it and getting it back on the road. Obviously, if you guys are thinking about doing something like this on your own, be very cautious moving forward. Take it to a reputable shop near you so they can kind of go in depth, look into a bike like that, just safety wise, in order to, safely ride one of these bikes on the road. Obviously, I've ridden this bike a little bit now, and I'm very happy with it. I've only put on maybe like 400 miles so far this year. This is an awesome bike. I'm super happy with the way it turned out. If you guys like this kind of content, obviously, subscribe to the channel. We got more rebuilds coming along, and actually the bike that's right next to the camera right now that you guys can't see has a turbo on it, and we're gonna be doing that one next on the channel. So I will see you guys in the next one. I'd love to hear some of your comments down below with this bike, and thank you guys for watching. Thank you for the support. I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.